I cradled the casserole with both hands, the dish still radiating warmth through the thick mitts I hadn't taken off yet. I'd made it just the way he liked, extra cheese, a dash of thyme, the kind that crisps at the edges just enough. The scent followed me out to the porch, mingling with the sharpness of the pine mulch they'd laid that week. I had hoped, quietly, gently, that this might be one of those simple moments. Thank you. A smile. Maybe even a hug if he wasn't. Too busy. He stepped outside, his face already tight, his jaw set like he was walking into a courtroom. I opened my mouth to say something soft, something motherly. "Mom," he said, raising his voice without raising his eyes. "Seriously?" I blinked, and then came the words I'll never forget. "You're just jealous of my wife." It didn't land on my ears. It landed in my chest, heavy, sour, like it knocked something loose inside me. I stood there, still holding the dish, as his voice stretched across the open yard. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't contained. The air caught it and carried it like it was meant to be heard, like it was meant to sting. The porch light above flickered, once, like it wasn't sure it should be watching. My heart pounded, louder than the wind pushing the leaves, louder than his footsteps as he turned away. A curtain moved across the street, another on the right. The neighbors didn't open their doors, didn't call out, didn't wave, but I saw them, behind the glass, peeking through their blinds. Everyone heard. No one wanted to be part of it. The casserole had cooled in my hands, the cheese no longer soft, the heat gone. I still hadn't moved. My cheeks burned, and the silence around me felt more pointed than his voice had been. I almost said his name. Just that. Ben. Like I did when he was 5 and scraped his knee on the driveway. My voice had always soothed him, but this wasn't a scraped knee. This wasn't a moment I could kiss better and send off with a cartoon Band-Aid. My lips parted, but nothing came out. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep it together. Years of things I hadn't said crowded into that space between us, but I kept them there, folded up, tight. I took one step back, then another, not rushed, just careful. Like backing away from a fire that wasn't mine, but knew my name. My foot brushed a brittle leaf, and it crumbled under my shoe like it couldn't take it either. This is how it ends, I thought, not with shouting, not with slammed doors, with silence. He didn't look back, just walked inside. The door closed with a quiet click. I reached my car. My hands shook as I placed the dish on the passenger seat. I sat down, pulling the door shut, gently. My chest felt hollow, like something had been scooped out and I'd just let it happen. I looked up. The porch light flickered again, once, then again. Weak, unsteady. I remembered the day we'd installed it together. He'd stood on the ladder, too proud to ask for help. I held the base steady, told him not to over-tighten the screws. We laughed, when he dropped the bulb and it didn't break. Now it flickered like it remembered me too. I didn't start the car right away. Just sat there, breathing, letting the stillness settle into my bones, letting it hurt, but not take me down. Not tonight. Every night before bed, I'd pass the hallway light and see them, his little shoes always lined up by the door, small and scuffed, toes pointing outward like they were ready to leap into tomorrow. He'd leave them that way without being told. I never made a fuss about it, but I noticed. I always noticed. I'd brush off the dirt with my hand sometimes, smoothing out his socks beside them. Little things, rituals maybe, habits that gave me peace. I'd whisper to myself, tomorrow's another good day. Whether I believed it or not, there was something comforting about those shoes waiting, like they believed the world would still be safe when morning came. Like he still believed that too. I used to think routines could protect us. If I just kept everything in order, shoes by the door, backpack zipped, oatmeal on the table by 7, Maybe the things I feared wouldn't knock too loudly, but I could feel it, even then. The way a chill sometimes settled in the house without any open windows. The way he'd glance at the clock when his daddy was late again. I'd turn off the light, careful not to trip over anything, and whisper goodnight to a hallway that held more love than it showed. I thought I was teaching him discipline. But maybe I was teaching him to be ready for disappointment. Quietly, neatly, without mess. The kitchen always smelled like something warm. Cinnamon or vanilla, or the last bit of pine sol I'd wiped across the counters. That morning, the sun came in sharp through the gingham curtains, lighting up the flour dust still floating in the air. He sat at the round table, his legs swinging back and forth, not touching the floor. I rolled out the dough and handed him the cookie cutter, a gingerbread man, even though it wasn't Christmas. He pressed it into the dough like it was the most important thing in the world. I made a head, he laughed, and now a foot. I smiled, brushing a streak of flour from his cheek. My hands were sticky, and the bowl still had bits clinging to the sides, but none of that mattered. For that moment, he was safe. And I needed that as much as he did. He looked up at me then, his tone soft. Mama, when people don't talk, does it mean they're mad? I stopped stirring, just for a second. No, baby, I said. Sometimes it just means they're thinking. But inside I wasn't sure. Because lately, silence has filled our home like fog. Thick, slow, hiding things I didn't want him to find. I kissed the top of his head and handed him another bit of dough. I didn't want him to know the truth, not yet. So I smiled and kept baking, letting the clink of the spoon cover what words couldn't. The table was set for 3, forks aligned, napkins folded into little triangles like I used to do back when I cared about presentation. The soup simmered on the stove, just the way he liked it, lentil with a touch of cumin. I'd even lit a candle, hoping the warmth might stretch farther than the table. But it didn't. The clock ticked, then tickled again, and I watched the soup go from steaming to still. He fidgeted in his chair, lifting one leg onto the seat the way he always did when he was nervous. Should we wait? He asked, glancing at the door. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say, just 5 more minutes. But I looked at the empty chair and something inside me folded. No, baby, I said softly. Go ahead and eat. He didn't ask again. He just picked up his spoon, careful not to slurp. I watched him blow on the surface before taking that first sip. I watched the candle flicker, weak and low. I watched everything, except the door, because I already knew it wouldn't open. That night, something broke in me. Not loudly, just enough to notice. And I think he noticed too. I thought I was protecting him. I really did. I told myself that silence was safer than stories too sharp to carry. So I never told him what his father said that night, or the way he didn't look back as he closed the door behind him. I folded those memories up like laundry and tucked them away. But silence grows roots. He became a quiet boy, polite, careful, the kind who held doors for others and never asked for seconds unless offered. He never raised his voice, never pressed when someone said, "I'm fine." He became someone I didn't worry about, because I'd taught him not to be worried out loud, but sometimes I'd catch him sitting too still, watching something without blinking, like he was waiting for something that never came. I wonder if he thought he did something wrong. I wonder if he filled in the blanks with things heavier than the truth, and I wonder if I should have risked telling him the messier version of our story before the silence finished shaping him. Every morning, I tucked one into his lunchbox. A folded piece of notebook paper with a little heart, or a short quote, or sometimes just, "You got this. Love, Mom." I wanted him to feel seen. I wanted him to carry something from me through the day, even when the house felt too quiet and his father's name wasn't mentioned anymore. I never missed a note. not even when I was tired or late for work. Writing those little messages became my own way of speaking, even when I didn't know what to say aloud. Years later, he told me he kept them all, in a shoebox under his bed. I laughed, thinking he was joking. "No, I'm serious," he said. "All of them." I didn't know whether to feel proud or ashamed, because maybe I was pouring all the words I couldn't say into those little slips of paper. Maybe I thought love written down was safer than love spoken out loud. He kept the box. I kept silent. I had hidden the letter behind the flour canister. Folded neatly, placed under the recipe. Cards I didn't use anymore. It wasn't that I planned to keep it forever. I just didn't know what to do with it. His father's handwriting was cold, short, final. I never wanted him to read those words. Then one afternoon, I came into the kitchen and saw it, sitting on the table, unfolded. The flour tin had been moved, slightly askew. My heart caught in my throat. He wasn't in the room. He didn't bring it up. And neither did I. I just straightened the tin, slid the letter back inside, closed the drawer. We ate dinner that night like nothing had changed, but I saw the way he watched me. Slower, quieter. He knew, and I knew he knew. Still, we didn't speak of it. The truth had finally stepped into the light, and both of us let it pass like a cloud. Sometimes silence isn't a wall, sometimes it's a mirror. And in that moment, I saw both of us in it. Still. Waiting. Not ready. I stood on the front steps with a loaf of banana bread in my hands, still warm through the foil. The sun had just started to warm the porch rail, and the new landscaping hadn't quite settled. Bits of mulch scattered like confetti on the cement. I looked up at the house, the same one I helped them buy. Every brick is familiar from afar, but not like this. It felt strange, knocking, like asking permission to enter something that already belonged to me in spirit. But I did. One soft knock. Then another, not too loud. I didn't want to be a bother. A bird chirped somewhere close, the kind of sound that usually made me smile. But today, it just reminded me of how quiet everything else was. A mother shouldn't have to knock. That was the first sign, and I felt it deep in my chest, right where the pride used to live. She opened the door with a smile that felt rehearsed. Her hair was perfect, her blouse tucked just right. "Oh, you made it," she said, stepping aside like I was the mailman, not her husband's mother. No hug, no warmth, just air. I stepped inside, holding the bread with both hands like a peace offering. Her perfume hit me before she even moved, sharp and floral, like something that stung if you breathed it in too long. It smelled expensive, but not inviting. In the background, I heard the TV, cartoons, some soft laughter. But it didn't make the house feel lived in. It made it feel curated. I looked at her, really looked, and I knew. I wasn't family in her eyes. I was something to manage, and at that moment, I felt like I was shrinking. Like I had to make myself smaller just to fit in the doorway. I hadn't even taken off my shoes when she pointed. "The kids made a mess," she chirped, eyes on a trail of cracker crumbs across the tile. "Do you mind?" Before I could answer, she handed me a broom. Not a seat, not a mug, a broom. My fingers wrapped around the handle on instinct. I stood still, unsure of what to do with the loaf in my other hand. I hadn't even placed it down. I looked at the crumbs, just a few, scattered near the island where plastic dinosaurs lay tipped over. The floor smelled faintly of apple juice and that sharp lemon cleaner that always makes your nose twitch. I didn't come here to sweep. I didn't bake that bread to be of help. But there I was, holding the broom like it belonged in my hand. More than a hug did. I forced a smile. "Of course," I whispered, but inside, something folded in half, not broken, just bent in a way I wasn't sure I'd come back from. He walked in right as I began sweeping. "She's just tired, Ma," he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck like a boy who knew he was about to disappoint me. I looked up at him. Really looked. There was a time he couldn't sleep without holding my pinky finger through the crib bars. He'd cry if I didn't say goodnight twice. "5 more minutes, Mama," he'd plead. Back then, my voice was his comfort. Now, I was something to smooth over. A wrinkle in his day. He gave me a half smile, the kind that said, "Don't make this a thing." So I didn't. But I saw it then, not just her distance, but his silence. And I realized he wasn't protecting me. He was keeping me in my place, and that place wasn't close. The broom bristles scraped across the tile in steady, slow strokes. The sound filled the quiet. I could hear the faint click of a clock upstairs, the hum of the fridge. But mostly, I heard myself trying not to cry. Each crumb I swept felt heavier than it should have. I focused on them, not because they mattered, but because I didn't trust my voice if I looked up. The sun came through the window, hitting the marble countertop just right, gleaming, spotless, the kind of clean that has no room for mess, no room for mistakes. I wondered if they noticed the way I stopped speaking, the way I moved slower than usual. Probably not. I'd swallowed bigger things before. But this one scratched on the way down. Pride is a hard thing to digest, especially when you're pretending it's not there. So I swept, and I said nothing. She passed behind me and paused just long enough to glance at the floor. "Thanks," she said, quick, dry, already turning. Away, no eye contact, no warmth, just thanks, like it was overdue. I stood still for a second, then placed the broom back against the wall, gently, quietly. Not for her sake, for mine. There was no applause, no acknowledgement. Just the hum of the dishwasher starting up and the faint buzz of the baby monitor on the mantel. I reached for the banana bread I'd brought, still unopened on the counter. I didn't say a word about it, neither did she. I looked around that house, beautiful, new, bright, and I realized something that made my chest ache and my spine straighten at the same time. This house may carry my name on the deed, but it would never carry my name in spirit, and I didn't need a key to know I wasn't really welcome. I was halfway through a story about the first snowman he ever built, the one with the crooked smile and my old scarf wrapped 3 times around its neck. He was only 5 then, but he'd insisted on carrying the carrot himself. We laughed until our cheeks were red. I had just gotten to the part about the snowman tipping sideways when the baby's cry broke through the room like a dropped plate. It was sharp, sudden. Without thinking, I rose from my chair. My body moved before my mind caught up. I'd helped decorate that nursery, picked the paint color, paid for the rocker by the window. My feet turned toward the stairs, but I didn't make it far. He stepped in front of me, quick, almost nervous. She doesn't. "Like anyone else touching him," he said. His eyes darted down the hallway. Not angry, just guarded. I stopped. My arms fell to my sides like they'd lost their purpose. I sat back down, not because I agreed, but because it felt like I had broken something sacred I hadn't meant to touch. The cushion beneath me didn't feel the same. I shifted a little, trying to find where comfort had gone, but it stayed missing. My hands hovered near my plate, one holding the fork, one resting near the napkin, still. Useless. The sweet potato on my fork had gone cold, and even the food felt out of place, like it didn't belong either. No one told me to stop speaking, no one raised their voice, but I felt it, clearer than words. That I'd stepped too far into something no longer mine. I looked around the table. Her hand on the baby monitor, his hand on his glass, and mine, just floating. The table was half cleared, a few cranberry smudges on the plates. The faint scent of lemon cleaner still lingered. They talked softly now about bedtimes and nap windows, and I just listened, smiling when I had to, chewing because it gave me something to do. The chair felt warm when I first sat in it. Now it felt like it had moved on without me. That night, I lay beneath the floral quilt I'd gifted them 2 Christmases ago. It had once belonged to my mother. The stitching along the edge was still slightly frayed, the thread pulled just a little where her cat used to knead. I had just closed my eyes when I heard it. Their voices, her voice, sharp and steady. She thinks she owns the place. My breath caught. I didn't move. I waited for his voice, for him to say, "That's not fair," or "She just wants to help," or anything. But I heard nothing. His silence filled the space between their sentences. It was louder than anything she said. The pipes creaked above the dresser. The white noise from the baby monitor hissed in the corner like static regret. But all I heard was what he didn't say. I pulled the quilt up to my chin, hold it tight, and stared at the ceiling like it might offer something softer than the truth. I lay still, eyes wide, counting the slow turns of the ceiling fan, waiting. I just needed a word. One. From him, something small, a breath of defense, a thread to hold on to. She doesn't. Or even, she means well. Anything. But all I heard was her voice painting a version of me I didn't recognize, and his silence letting it dry. I blinked hard. Once. Twice. When did my son learn to stay quiet like that? Who taught him that keeping peace meant keeping me out? I had been his first home, the voice that soothed him, the lap he curled into when storms rattled the windows, and now he lets someone redraw me like a stranger on the outside. Stillness filled the room like fog. Cold air slipped in through a crack in the window, brushing the side of my face. I didn't shiver, but something deep inside me did. The hallway lights were still on. I could see the soft glow beneath the door, faint lines of warmth, just enough to cast a shadow across the room. Laughter drifted from the nursery, not loud, not cruel, just distant. A kind of joy that didn't need me. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my body, not for the cold, but for the ache. That slow, creeping ache that settles in your bones when you realize you're present, but not included. I sat up, swung my legs over the side of the bed. My slippers rested neatly where I left them, like they were still waiting for me to belong here. I didn't put them on. The heater kicked on with a low hum. The scent of baby lotion from the hall floated in, soft and sweet. But it didn't soothe me. Not tonight. I looked around the room, beautiful, quiet, meant for rest, but I didn't feel rested. I felt erased, like I was only allowed to stay so long as I didn't take up too much space. So I stayed still, not asleep, not quite awake, just quietly missing from the life I helped build. I'd meant to file it with the tax receipts, neatly, out of sight, but it was late and my hands were tired. The folder felt heavier than usual that night, not in weight, but in memory. I slid it into the second drawer, just under the takeout menus. I thought it would get lost in the clutter, thought it was safe, surrounded by pizza coupons and old-school calendars. Inside that folder were copies of every check, every stamped envelope, every note from the bank confirming payment. It was quiet proof, not meant to boast, just meant to be known by me. I never expected her to look there. I never expected her to know what I'd done, one payment at a time, but in a house full of closed doors, paper doesn't stay hidden forever. She didn't say anything the next morning, but the toast was already on the plate when I walked in. Not just toasted, perfectly buttered, corner to corner. My coffee was poured, just the way I take it. No questions asked. She didn't meet my eyes. But her steps were softer, her voice gentler. Even the way she handed me the sugar bowl felt like an apology wrapped in porcelain. I stirred my coffee slowly, took a bite of toast, didn't ask how she slept, And yet I knew. She'd read it. Every page, every line that spelled out how much of this life was paid for by someone she rarely thanked. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was full of what wasn't said. Full of what she couldn't unsay now, even if she tried. I walked into the kitchen and saw it right away. My chair pulled out from the table, a napkin folded just so beside the plate, a fork resting perfectly on the edge. It looked like a small thing. A simple gesture, but I felt it. It echoed in a way her voice hadn't, in a way her hands hadn't until now. I sat down slowly, careful not to disturb whatever unspoken apology this was meant to be. The ceramic mug steamed quietly beside me, the scent of cinnamon rising with it. I watched the oatmeal across the table being stirred. Clockwise, calm, like nothing had changed, but everything had. She didn't say good morning. She didn't have to. He was halfway out the door when he leaned down. No warning, no words, just a quick kiss on my hair, the kind he used to give when he was still a boy, when his backpack was bigger than his shoulders and he didn't care who saw. I didn't turn. I just closed my eyes and let it land. Soft, familiar, heavy, in the way kindness becomes when it's carrying something else with it. He didn't mention the folder, didn't ask if I'd noticed the toast, didn't say anything about what I already knew, and I didn't stop him. I just sat there, holding that moment like it might warm me through. The eggs were fluffy. The butter didn't melt too fast. Someone had even cut the crust off the toast, like I used to do for him. The table was full, but the silence said more than anyone ever could. I chewed slowly, tasted the care, the effort, the attempt. But there's something about love that's been cooked in guilt. It's warmer, more tender, but it doesn't hold, not the way truth does, and truth never came. No one said thank you. No one said, we know now, just more toast, more sugar, more sideways glances that felt like offerings and avoidance all in one. I didn't need them to serve me breakfast. I just needed someone to say it. But they didn't. And so I smiled and swallowed, like I'd learned to do so many times before. I moved quietly, slower than I needed to, careful not to wake the baby or stir more than the air already had. The bag I reached for had been with me since '86, a gift from Harold, back when leather still meant something special. The zipper groaned open like it knew this was no ordinary trip. I folded my nightgown, my slippers, a half-used jar of face, cream. Nothing large, nothing loud. Then the dignity part came. That folded last, quietly, like it had learned how to make itself small when the room had no space for it. Every movement felt like a farewell, but not the dramatic kind. The kind you pack with your own 2 hands when you know no one's going to stop you. The house breathed around me. Every sound is clearer in the quiet, the low hum of the fridge, the wheeze of the vent above the hallway, the tiny click of the clock just outside the bedroom. None of these things belonged to me, but I had memorized them, and they felt like they were memorizing me back, marking my exit like soft witnesses. It was 4 a.m., but the walls didn't know. The carpet didn't shift. The door frames didn't learn differently. Still, something about the air told me to be certain, to listen closely before I made that final step. And I did. And I was. I walked into the bathroom and stood for a moment, letting the dim light from the hallway spill across the tile. The mirror was still fogged at the corners from someone's shower. The night before, maybe hers. I reached for my toothbrush. My hand hesitated. It was just a toothbrush, plastic, cheap, the kind they sell in family packs, but it had been here, next to hers, for months now, upright in a chipped cup. Our bristles sometimes touch, my presence woven into the morning routine. Without ever being spoken aloud, I placed it back in the cup, slowly, carefully. Let them wonder if I'd return, I thought. The single blue bristle at the edge was bent. just enough to look like it had a question it never got to ask. The hallway was narrow, and I knew the spots that creaked. I'd tiptoed down it enough times to memorize the good planks. But one betrayed me. The board just past the nursery door. Toy. Creaked, loud and sharp, and I froze like a child caught where she shouldn't be. For one impossible moment, I thought maybe he'd hear it. Maybe he'd step into the hallway, not to stop me, but to say something. Anything. I stared at the sliver of light glowing under the nursery door. The white noise machine hummed inside, soft, steady, like rain on a windshield. My heart beat louder than it should have. But no footsteps came, no voice, no movement. Just that one creak, echoing longer than it had any right to. I waited. One breath, then two. I waited long enough to remember the times he used to wake to the sound of my voice. Back when he needed me for everything, even the light on the stairs. Now, he didn't need me at all, or didn't want to. The door stayed shut, so I walked toward the front. The nightlight cast long shadows across the entryway, pooling under the bench where everyone left their shoes. My pair was tucked in neatly. No one would trip over them. I turned the knob slowly. Each click sounded like a note in a song I never meant to write. The air outside was cold and still, sharp on my cheeks. I stepped onto the porch without looking back. I didn't cry. I didn't say goodbye. I carried my silence out with me, and it never made a sound. The knock was soft, twice, then a pause. I stood in the hallway, just behind the curtain, watching. Her figure blur through the fabric. She was alone, no stroller, no coat draped over her arm, just a small potted plant cradled in both hands like it might speak on her behalf. It looked too fragile for the moment, and yet, somehow right. I didn't move right away. I let her wait, just long enough to wonder how it feels. Some part of me, some old, aching part, wanted her to stand there long enough to understand what silence can say when it stretches. Then I opened the door. The breeze slipped in first, carrying the scent of garden soil and something faintly floral, lilacs maybe, though they were almost done blooming now. She looked up, startled, like she didn't expect me to answer at all. Neither of us said anything, at least not right away. She held it out to me without a word. A peace lily. Roots still damp, soil carefully wrapped in the base. Peace lily, she said softly, her voice barely above the wind. I reached for it. My fingers brushed the glossy leaves. Still alive. Still. Trying. I hadn't watered anything since I left their house. Plants don't feel right when you're not sure if you're growing or just sitting still. But this one, it breathed. I tried. I looked at the pot again, the way the roots curled but didn't tangle. It was an offering, not big, not loud, but something alive, something that could grow if you let it. Funny how the right gift isn't grand. It's something that breathes when words fail. We sat in the kitchen, the same place I used to pour her coffee without asking how she took it. Now, the kettle was already hissing low behind me, and neither of us reached for it. Her hands rested on the hem of her sleeve, fingers twisting, untwisting. "He's back in therapy," she said finally, voice barely holding itself up. "I'm learning too." I said nothing, just watched. She didn't look at me, not once. Her eyes stayed on the floor, or the rim of her fingernails, or somewhere in the middle of everything she hadn't said yet. There was mascara still clinging to the edge of one eye. Just barely, like it had been wiped away too fast. She wasn't here to fix it all, and I wasn't expecting her to. But she was here. That mattered more than she knew. I reached into the cupboard and pulled down 2 teacups, placed them gently on the table, upside down. She noticed. Her hands paused in her lap. She didn't ask why. It wasn't meant to be cruel. Just a pause. Breath. A moment to see if the silence between us held sincerity or strategy. She didn't protest, didn't fidget, just wait. I sat across from her, the steam from the kettle now soft and steady. The china between us caught the shifting light from the blinds, gentle stripes across pale porcelain. We both watched it, like neither of us wanted to be the first to speak again. It was quiet, but not empty. The kind of silence where something was settling. Not breaking, just learning where it could safely land. Without saying a word, I turned one cup over, then the other, not quickly, not with fanfare. Just the simple sound of ceramic meeting wood. Her breath caught, just slightly. I poured the tea, slowly. The scent of Earl Grey lifted between us, and the steam curled in the air like a small bridge being built. She looked at me then, really looked. I didn't smile, but I didn't frown either. This wasn't a full forgiveness, but it was a beginning. The tea sat between us, quiet, warm, ready. I wasn't saying yes to everything, I was saying, start here. The side door creaked, the one that always sticks a little, when it's humid. It gave itself away, like it always had. No knock, no doorbell. Just the shuffling of feet that already knew where the floor dips and which step skips. I didn't move. I stayed right where I was, heart slow but steady. My hands, resting in my lap, still warm from the tea I hadn't finished. Some apologies don't need an audience. Some don't wear shoes or carry flowers. Some just walk in through the old side door, quiet, unsure, but moving forward anyway. We ended up in the garage, still cluttered with everything we said we'd sort someday. Old rope, rusted hinges, that. Half-painted stool with the wobbly leg. The faded box marked kites sat exactly where it always had. Back left corner, behind the cooler, and under a rolled-up welcome mat that never made it to any front door. The scent in there hadn't changed. Sawdust, mildew, and a trace of wood glue that lived in the walls now. It wrapped around us like a memory. Thick, familiar, a little too close. This was where he built his first kite. I still remembered his tongue peeking out in concentration, that furrowed brow, the way he held the string like it carried the whole sky. And here we were again, not as builders. Just as people trying to stand inside the ruins without backing out. He didn't look at me, not at first. His hands moved instead, fidgeting with an old rag, picking at the edge of a splintered shelf like it might save him from having to speak. Waited. Then finally his voice, thin and brittle. I missed you when I needed you most. The words barely reached me, but I heard them. I heard all of it. He looked up then, eyes wet, searching for a place to land. Some safe spot in all the years he hadn't reached out, and I gave it to him. I didn't cry. I didn't blink too fast or look away. I just met him there, in that fragile pause, where nothing else had to be said yet. At that moment, he wasn't a husband, or a father, or a man who'd looked through me more times than I could count. He was just my boy again, the one who once sobbed when his kite got tangled in the tree, who ran to me like I had the power to untangle string and sky. I didn't speak, didn't try, to fix anything. I just stepped close enough that if his grief needed a place to rest, it could find me. My hands stayed by my sides. I didn't reach for him, but he reached toward me. Not with his body, but with something smaller. Something is aching, and I let him be small again, just for a little while. Around us were broken things. A rake with a split handle, a can with its lid half off, paint trays with color turned to skin, nails scattered like punctuation that never found their sentence. But it didn't feel unfinished anymore, not compared to what we'd carried between us. I reached out and touched the box labeled kites. The cardboard sagged a little, the tape frayed at the edges. Then I touched him, lightly, right at the elbow. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Relief. I didn't say much. Just one breath against the ache in my chest. You came, and that was all the fixing I needed. Their visits started again. Not all at once, not like before. Casual, cautious, almost like testing bathwater with your toes. I laid out the plates anyway. Folded the napkins the way I always did, with the little point at the top. My mother used to say that made the table look respectful. I suppose I still believe that. The cornbread was warm. The chamomile steeped just long enough to feel like comfort. I passed the salt. Off for seconds. Asked about work and preschool and whether the little one liked blueberries now. Not a single sharp word left my lips, though I tasted them, sitting, right there on the back of my tongue, like pepper you don't sprinkle. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't loud. It's not in the grand gestures. It's in how you butter their bread, even after they've made you feel unwelcome. It's in how your hands stay gentle when your heart remembers too much. He reached for me without being told. The baby, I mean. His little fingers touched my cheek, just a soft brush, like blessing more than affection. He didn't pull back. He didn't look to anyone for approval, and no one stopped him. That mattered more than I expected. I held him, pressed my lips to his soft temple, let the scent of baby lotion and warm muffins fill my lungs. For a moment, everything felt still. Not erased, but quieted. Like grief was finally done thrashing. In his eyes, I was never unwelcome, and in that moment, I let that be enough. They passed around baby photos and vacation plans, talked about new strollers, preschool applications, and something called gentle parenting. They laughed, loud and often. No one asked me if I was happy, and truthfully, I didn't need them to. Some seasons of life are for listening more than speaking. I sat in my corner, hands wrapped around a warm mug, the tea going lukewarm and then cool in my hands. The porch door was cracked just enough to let in the breeze. I could hear the insects singing, even if no one else noticed. The silence wrapped around me like a shawl. Not heavy, not lonely, just mine. And in that quiet space, I was content. A few days later, I signed the lease, just across town. Close enough for drop-ins, but far enough that the space stayed mine. The apartment was small, but the kitchen had a wide window that faced east. Morning light mattered more to me these days than closet space, and there was just enough room for my rocker near the sliding door. The leasing agent was young, polite, and offered me a cookie with the paperwork. I took one. I remember the way the pen felt as it moved across the page. Steady, ink flowing smooth, like the paper had been waiting. For me, signing my name felt like writing it in fresh air. Not leaving, just starting again, but for me this time. They asked why I wouldn't move in, why I was still paying rent when there's plenty of room in the house. I smiled, folded my napkin. I didn't say much, just enough. Some things, I said softly, are better earned. I wasn't bitter, not proud either, just sure. They nodded, but I don't think they fully understood. And that was all right, because I did. My peace isn't something I borrow. It's not something I'm allowed or invited to enjoy. It lives with me now, like the sunlight through my kitchen window, like the breeze that lifts the edge of my curtain, like the muffins I bake on Sundays just because I want to. I used to think love meant staying, even when the room grew colder. But sometimes, love is what lets you leave with grace and light your own porch again. If this reminds you of something you've carried quietly, I'd be honored if you shared it below. And if you'd like to sit with me for more stories, you're always welcome here. And subscribe now.